Hello, everyone. Tonight, we delve into a truth so profound, it threatens to shatter everything you thought you knew about your own struggles. What if the habits that shackle you, the whispers that pull you back into the shadows, are not merely weaknesses of will, but echoes of an ancient, unseen war waged within the very chambers of your soul? We are often told to fight our bad habits, to conquer them with brute force, with sheer determination. But what if this approach, though valiant, misses the true battlefield? What if the key to liberation lies not in a frontal assault, but in fortifying a hidden citadel, a sacred ground within each of us that, once secured, renders the enemy powerless? Imagine for a moment a world not so different from our own, yet veiled by a thin membrane of perception. In this world, unseen forces, there are the whispering shadows, insidious entities born of complacency and despair, feeding on our failures, growing stronger with every relapse, every surrendered moment. And then there are the silent sentinels, echoes of divine wisdom, always present, always offering a path to light, yet often unheard amidst the din of our modern anxieties. Our story begins with Alara, a soul caught in the relentless undertow. For her, it was the digital siren song, the endless scroll, the constant distraction that frayed the edges of her intentions, dissolving her days into a haze of unfulfilled potential. Each evening, as the screen's glow painted her face, a quiet dread would settle, a gnawing recognition of another day lost, another promise to herself broken. She yearned for focus, for purpose. But the shadow of distraction, subtle yet suffocating, clung to her like a second skin. It whispered promises of escape, of fleeting pleasure, of an effortless void where responsibilities faded, and Alara, weary from countless failed attempts to break free, often succumbed. She had tried everything, setting alarms, blocking apps, even physical abstinence for short bursts. But the shadow was cunning. It didn't just exist on her screen. It resided in her thoughts, in the momentary void between tasks, in the subconscious craving for stimulation. It was a phantom limb, an invisible weight, a constant drain on her life force. This shadow, it wasn't a simple urge. It was a complex web woven from anxiety, boredom, procrastination, and a deep-seated fear of confronting her own silent spaces. It had a voice, an alluring cadence that promised comfort, yet delivered only emptiness. It was the antithesis of growth, the architect of stagnation. Alara felt its grip tighten with each passing season, her dreams gathering dust like forgotten relics. She saw others thriving, building, creating, while she remained trapped in a self-made labyrinth of digital distraction. Despair was a cold hand gripping her heart, threatening to extinguish the last embers of hope. One particularly dark night, after hours lost in the digital abyss, a profound weariness settled upon Alara. Not just physical exhaustion, but a soul-deep fatigue that threatened to consume her. She stared at her reflection in the darkened screen, a stranger staring back hollow, eyed and distant. Is this all there is? Am I destined to be forever bound by this unseen chain? It was in that moment of absolute surrender, of relinquishing all preconceived notions of battle, that something shifted. A faint echo, a whisper from the silent sentinels, stirred in the quiet recesses of her mind. It wasn't a command, but a gentle pull, guiding her hand towards an old leather, bound book gathering dust on her shelf. A book she hadn't touched in years, almost forgotten amidst the digital chaos. The Book of Proverbs, its cover worn and embossed, felt cool against her feverish skin. As she opened it, the pages rustled like ancient wings, releasing a faint, almost sacred aroma. Her eyes, usually darting, now settled upon a single verse illuminated, not by external light, but by an inner radiance that seemed to pierce through the gloom of her despair. Proverbs 4:23, the words, simple yet profound, resonated with an authority that bypassed her intellect and spoke directly to the core of her being. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. How does one guard something so ethereal, so intrinsically vulnerable? Her modern mind, accustomed to tangible problems and quantifiable solutions, struggled to grasp its meaning. Was it about emotion? About love? But then, the silent sentinel, the embodiment of ancient wisdom, stirred within her, not as an external voice, but as a sudden, clear understanding, a vision unfolding in her mind. The heart was not merely the organ that beat within her chest, nor just the seat of her emotions. In the ancient tongue, in the tapestry of biblical thought, the heart was the very core of one's being, the center of intellect, will, intention, memory, and conscience. It was the wellspring from which all thoughts, decisions, and actions originated. It was the control room of the soul, the command center of one's entire existence. It meant discerning what was allowed to enter, what narratives she entertained, what desires she nourished. It was about creating a sacred, unassailable space where her true self could flourish, untouched by the insidious whispers of the shadow. It was about proactively choosing the thoughts, the influences, the very intentions that would shape her life, rather than passively reacting to the external stimuli that The insight struck Alara with the force of a revelation. She had been fighting the outward manifestations of the shadow, the endless scrolling, the procrastination, but she had neglected the true battleground, the heart, the source. She had been trying to prune the branches while the root remained infected. The method wasn't about willpower alone. It was about wisdom. It wasn't about suppression. It was about cultivation. It was about understanding that her external reality was merely a reflection of her internal landscape. If her heart was unguarded, open to every fleeting impulse and external lure, then her life would inevitably drift, pulled by the currents of distraction and desire. But if her heart was fortified, a sanctuary of purpose and intentionality, then her actions would flow from a deep, unwavering source of strength. This one method, simple yet revolutionary, was a call to profound self-awareness, to a radical responsibility for her inner domain. It was the forgotten martial art of the soul, a defensive strategy that paradoxically led to offensive victory. It promised not just habit breaking, but soul reclaiming, and as the night deepened, Alara felt a spark ignite within her, a flicker of hope she hadn't felt. This wasn't another self-help fad. This was an ancient, timeless truth, a blueprint for freedom etched into the very fabric of existence. She resolved to embark on this journey, to dedicate the next 7 days to understanding and applying this one profound method from the Book of Proverbs. She would learn to guard her heart. The first rays of dawn painted Alara's room in hues of soft gold, yet the air crackled with an almost tangible. The shadow, sensing her resolve, stirred. It wasn't loud, not yet. Just a faint, almost imperceptible hum in the back of her mind, a familiar invitation to slip back into the comfortable numbness of distraction. But Alara was different today. The words, "above all else, guard your heart," echoed with a new clarity. Guarding, she realized, began with awareness. Not just awareness of the habit itself, but awareness of its genesis, its subtle lures, its entry points into her inner sanctum. Her first task was to become a silent observer of her own thoughts, a sentinel at the gates of her mind. She started by acknowledging the shadow's presence. When the familiar twitch to reach for her phone arose, she didn't immediately fight it. Instead, she paused. Ah, she thought, this pause, a mere breath in time, was revolutionary. It created a tiny gap, a sliver of space between stimulus and response, a space where conscious choice could reside before. Her actions were almost automatic, a knee-jerk reaction to an unconscious impulse. Now she was inserting a moment of intentionality. The shadow, accustomed to effortless dominion, bristled. It intensified its whispers, conjuring images of urgent notifications, unread messages, tantalizing videos. Just a quick look, it cooed. You deserve a break. But Alara held fast, her gaze fixed on the inner landscape. She observed the craving, the subtle anxiety that accompanied it, the rationalizations her mind began to construct. This wasn't suppression. It was pure observation, a dispassionate cataloging of the enemy's tactics. She saw how the shadow exploited boredom, how it preyed on moments of uncertainty, how it capitalized on the slightest hint of discomfort. Proverbs, she recalled, speaks of the simple believing everything, but the prudent giving thought to their steps. This was prudence. This was giving thought. Each time the urge appeared, she would internally name it, acknowledge it, and then consciously redirect her focus. It was exhausting. The mental effort was immense, like constantly pushing against an invisible current. She didn't achieve perfect freedom from distraction that day. There were still slips, still moments where the old patterns asserted themselves, but each slip was now a data point, an insight into the shadow's methodology, rather than. By evening a new weariness settled upon her, but this was different from the despair of previous nights. This was the fatigue of a soldier who had spent the day scouting the enemy lines, understanding their movements, preparing for battle. She had identified the key points of entry, the vulnerabilities the shadow exploited. The first day was not about victory, but about reconnaissance. It was about truly seeing the enemy, not as a vague, overwhelming force. And in that seeing, in that understanding, lay the first glimmer of hope, the foundational stone for guarding her heart. Day 2 dawned, crisp and clear, yet Alara felt the weight of the previous day's mental exertion. The shadow, far from retreating, seemed to have learned from her observations. Its whispers were subtler, more insidious, weaving themselves into the fabric of her productive thoughts, blurring the line. But Alara, armed with the wisdom of Proverbs, was ready for a new strategy, fortifying the gates. The ancient text, she mused, wasn't just about internal vigilance. It was about proactive defense. Proverbs speaks extensively about wisdom building her house, about diligence, about foresight. To guard her heart meant to create an environment, both physical and mental, that supported her resolve, making it. She removed her phone from her bedside table, placing it in a drawer across the room, out of immediate reach. She disabled all non-essential notifications. She tidied her workspace, removing clutter that invited mental disarray. These were not mere acts of discipline. They were acts of reverence for her inner sanctum, physical manifestations of her intent to protect her heart from the relentless assault of A wise man, the sentinel seemed to whisper, recalling Proverbs 14:15, looks to his steps. And her steps today were about erecting barriers. She created specific time blocks for deep work, periods during which her phone remained entirely off or in a different room. She scheduled deliberate breaks, moving away from her screen, engaging in simple physical activities like stretching or walking. These weren't escapes from the shadow. They were deliberate acts of reclaiming mental space, moments where her heart could breathe unburdened. The shadow, infuriated by these fortifications, began to escalate its tactics. It didn't just whisper, it projected images of anxiety. What if you're missing something important? What if a crucial email arrives? What if someone needs you? It preyed on her inherent desire to be connected, to be helpful, twisting these virtues into vectors for distraction. Alara felt the familiar pangs of FOMO, the fear of missing out. Her mind raced, conjuring scenarios of disaster if she remained offline. But then she remembered the core of guarding her heart. Choice she had chosen this path. She had chosen to prioritize her inner peace. She paused, took a deep breath, and consciously reaffirmed her decision. My heart, she declared silently, is not a public square for every passing thought. It is a fortress, and I am its keeper. This internal declaration, a fierce act of will, sent ripples through her being. The pangs of anxiety lessened. The shadow's projections, though still present, lost some of their power. She began to understand that guarding her heart wasn't about eliminating temptation entirely, but about building an internal resistance, a spiritual immune system that recognized and neutralized threats. By evening, the difference was palpable. While not entirely free, Alara had experienced significant stretches of focused work, moments of genuine presence. She had felt the thrill of authorship over her own attention. She had not only observed the shadow, but had actively begun to construct defenses against it. Day 2 taught her that guarding her heart was an active, continuous process of intentionality, of making deliberate choices to protect her inner sanctuary from the ceaseless barrage of external demands and internal urges. It was a commitment to self-sovereignty, a declaration that her attention, her focus, her very essence. Day 3 arrived, bringing with it a subtle shift in Alara's perception. The previous days had been about observing and defending. Today, under the guidance of the ancient wisdom, she moved to a more proactive stance. The cleansing fire Proverbs, she knew, spoke of purging evil from one's presence, of separating oneself from corrosive influences. To guard her heart fully, she realized, she needed to actively remove the elements that continuously fed the shadow, not just defend against them. Her first target was her digital environment. With a firm resolve, She began to unsubscribe from newsletters that offered no genuine value, to unfollow social media accounts that triggered comparison or anxiety, to delete apps that were purely time sinks. Each click of the delete or unsubscribe button felt like a small act of exorcism, a symbolic purging of the toxins that had poisoned her mental landscape. The shadow, sensing the direct assault on its feeding grounds, reacted with a surge of resistance. It conjured phantom urgency, the fear that she might be missing out on valuable information, on connections, on entertainment. "What if you need that?" it whispered, attempting to instill doubt and regret. But Elara held firm. She remembered the Proverbs: "Remove the dross from the silver, and a vessel for the smith emerges." Proverbs 25:4. This was her dross, and she was the smith, refining her inner vessel. The cleansing extended beyond the digital. She looked at her physical surroundings. Were there objects that triggered the habit, that reminded her of past indulgences? She tidied, organized, and even removed some items that cluttered her mind as much as her space. This physical decluttering was a powerful mirror for the mental purging she was undertaking. More profoundly, Elara began to cleanse her internal narratives. She identified the limiting beliefs, the self-defeating stories she told herself that justified her habit. "I can't focus. Everyone else is doing it." These were the internal whispers that amplified the shadow's power. She challenged each one, consciously replacing them with truths from Proverbs. "As he thinks in his heart, so is he." Proverbs 23:7. If she thought she was undisciplined, she would remain so. If she affirmed her capacity for focus, she would cultivate it. This was the most difficult cleansing of all, for it required confronting deeply ingrained patterns of thought. It was like sifting through years of accumulated mental debris, deciding what to keep and what to discard. There were moments of frustration, moments where the old narratives felt too comfortable, too familiar to let go. But with each discarded lie, each consciously chosen truth, her heart felt lighter. The noise in her mind had diminished significantly. The shadow's whispers, though still present, were less potent, less convincing. She had not only observed the enemy and built defenses, but she had actively dismantled its strongholds, cutting off its supply lines. The cleansing fire had burned away much of the old, making space for the new. She was learning that guarding her heart was not a passive act of defense, but it was about creating an inner sanctuary so pure, so well ordered, that the shadows had no place to hide, no sustenance to draw from. And in that cleared space, a sense of calm, a nascent feeling of peace, began to take root. Day 4 brought with it a different kind of energy, a sense of anticipation. Having observed, defended, and cleansed, Elara now turned her attention to the next. Proverbs, she knew, was rich with metaphors of planting, of diligent cultivation, of the fruit that comes from righteous labor. It wasn't enough to remove the weeds. She had to plant something beautiful in their place. The empty spaces left by the cleansing were vulnerable. If left fallow, the shadow would inevitably try to replant its destructive seeds. So Elara began to intentionally fill her days and her mind with life, giving activities with habits that nourished her soul and aligned with her deepest values. Her first new seed was intentional learning. Instead of passively consuming endless content, she chose one topic she truly wanted to understand and dedicated specific time slots to reading about it, to engaging with it actively. She found herself drawn to ancient texts, to philosophical treatises, to works that expanded her mind rather than merely entertained it. This was active cultivation of intellect, a profound investment in her inner garden. Next, she sowed seeds of creativity. She picked up a sketchbook she hadn't touched in years, allowing her hands to move, to create. Without judgment, she listened to classical music, not as background noise, but as a deliberate act of aesthetic appreciation, allowing its harmonies to soothe and inspire her. These were acts of filling her heart with beauty, with self-expression, with the quiet joy of creation. The shadow, now significantly weakened, still attempted its intrusions. "This is too much effort," it whispered. "You're forcing it. Just relax." It tried to exploit the natural human tendency towards ease and instant gratification, but Elara recognized the voice. She understood that sowing new seeds required patience, diligence, and a commitment to delayed gratification. Proverbs reminded her, "The hand of the diligent makes rich." Proverbs 10:4. This richness wasn't merely material, it was the richness of a well-tended soul, a mind. She also began to cultivate gratitude. Each evening she would write down 3 things she was truly thankful for. This simple practice shifted her focus from what was lacking, from what she needed to escape, to the abundance that was already present in her life. Gratitude, she realized, was a powerful disinfectant against the shadow's corrosive negativity. It was a sunbeam warming the soil of her heart, encouraging new growth. Her days, once fragmented and hollow, were now filled with purpose and meaning. The habit, though not entirely vanquished, no longer held the same magnetic pull. She was not just resisting, she was building, creating, flourishing. Guarding her heart, she realized, was not just about defense, but about creation. It was about actively designing an inner world so rich, so vibrant, that the shadows found no purchase. She was becoming an architect of her own soul, shaping her destiny with each intentional act, each new seed sown. The quiet joy she felt was a testament to the power of transformation, a silent hymn to the wisdom she had unearthed. Day 5 dawned with a storm brewing, both literally outside and metaphorically within Elara's soul. This was the tempest. The shadow, enraged by her persistent defiance and the flourishing new life within her heart, mounted its fiercest counterattack. It wasn't whispers today, it was a roaring gale, a barrage of doubts, anxieties, and overwhelming urges. Elara awoke feeling restless, irritable, a deep craving gnawing at her. The thought of her phone, of the easy escape it offered, was almost unbearable. Her carefully constructed defenses felt flimsy, her newly sown seeds vulnerable to the storm. "You're weak," the shadow roared in her mind. "This is too hard, you're going to fail, just like every other time. What's the point? Just give in, one moment of peace. That's all you want." It resurrected memories of past failures, weaving a tapestry of defeat that threatened to engulf her. This was the moment of truth, the crucible where true resolve was forged. Proverbs, she recalled, speaks of the righteous falling 7 times and rising again. Proverbs 24-16. It speaks of the importance of steadfastness, of not abandoning wisdom in times of trouble. This wasn't about perfect execution, it was about perseverance. Elara felt a profound inner battle. Another part, the nascent strength cultivated over the past 4 days, held firm, clinging to the wisdom she had embraced. She didn't try to suppress the overwhelming urge. Instead, she acknowledged its intensity. She felt the physical discomfort, the mental agitation, but this time she didn't identify with it. She remembered the sentinel's words, "Your heart is a fortress, and you are its keeper." She physically removed herself from her room, knowing the proximity to her phone would be too much. She went for a long, arduous walk, letting the biting wind clear her head, letting the physical exertion ground her. With each step she recited a silent mantra. "I am the keeper of my heart, my will is strong, I will not yield." This was a fierce act of self-assertion, a declaration of sovereignty over her inner. She also sought solace in the Proverbs themselves, not just a single verse, but allowing the ancient words to wash over her. "Do not be wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones." Proverbs 3-7-8, the emphasis on shunning evil, on fearing the Lord, reverence for divine order, gave her strength. By late afternoon, she had not given in, she had endured. The urge hadn't vanished entirely, but its intensity had dramatically diminished. It was as if the shadow had expended its most potent ammunition and found its target unyielding. A profound sense of quiet victory settled upon her. Day 5 was not about avoiding the battle, but about surviving it, about standing firm when everything screamed for surrender. It taught her that guarding her heart meant unwavering vigilance, even in the face of the fiercest assaults, a deep trust in the wisdom she had chosen. She had faced the shadow at its most formidable, and she had not broken. She was learning to be truly steadfast, a keeper of her heart in the face of overwhelming odds. Day 6 dawned, not with the triumph of a final victory, but with the quiet, profound sense of a new beginning. The remnants of the tempest from Day 5 had cleared, leaving behind a sky of pristine blue. This was the dawn of a new self. The shadow's presence was now a mere echo, a distant memory, no longer a dominant force in her daily life. The intense cravings were gone, replaced by a quiet strength, a calm resolve. Alara understood that guarding her heart wasn't just about fighting a battle. Proverbs, she reflected, speaks of wisdom as a tree of life, bringing health and peace. It speaks of the path of the righteous, which is like the morning sun, shining brighter and brighter until the full day. She was on that path. Her actions were now flowing from a different source. Before, her days were a constant struggle against the gravitational pull of the habit. Now her energy was channeled into creating, learning, connecting Fey activities this was the fruit of guarding her heart, a fundamental shift in her being, a realignment with her truest self. She found herself naturally seeking out activities that nourished her, making choices that empowered her, almost without conscious effort. The internal friction had significantly reduced. She spent time planning her day with clear intentions, not as a chore, but as an act of thoughtful creation. She felt a profound connection to the present moment, a richness that had long been absent from her fragmented existence. The shadow, in its diminished state, occasionally tried a subtle lure, a fleeting thought of boredom, a mild curiosity for the digital abyss. But now, Alara recognized it instantly. It was like a transparent veil, easily seen through, easily dismissed. Her heart, once a besieged city, was now a vibrant, thriving metropolis, its walls strong, its gates well guarded, its citizens, her thoughts and intentions purposeful and harmonious. This day was about integration, about truly stepping into the identity of someone who was no longer defined by her habit, but by her intentionality, her wisdom, her self-sovereignty. She was not just fey-breaking Fea. Guarding her heart had transformed her from a victim of circumstance into an architect of her destiny. It was a profound realization that her power lay not in external control, but in internal governance, in the meticulous and loving stewardship of her own inner world. The dawn of Day 6 was not an end, but a glorious beginning, a testament to the transformative power of ancient wisdom applied with modern resolve. Alara was not just Day 7. The air shimmered not with the anxiety of battle, but with the quiet radiance of triumph. Alara awoke with a sense of profound peace, a lightness she hadn't known in years. This was the unbroken dawn, the culmination of her week, long journey, the manifestation of the ancient promise. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. The shadow, once a formidable adversary, was now merely a faint wisp on the distant horizon of her memory, its power dissolved by the persistent light of her intentionality. The habit no longer held its sway. The cravings were gone, replaced by a deep sense of contentment and self-possession. Alara realized that the method from Proverbs wasn't about a quick fix, but about a fundamental restructuring. It was about consistently choosing to be the guardian of her most precious asset, Fey, her heart. This wasn't just about avoiding a bad habit. It was about cultivating a good life, a life flowing from a source of wisdom, purpose, and peace. Her days were now organized not by external demands or impulsive desires, but by her deeply held values. Her focus was sharp, her presence unwavering. She found joy in simple things, the quiet of a morning, the warmth of a good book, the focused engagement in her work. These were the fruits of a guarded heart, a heart that was no longer an open field for every passing seed of distraction, but a carefully tended garden, flourishing with life. Alara reflected on the journey. The initial observation of Day 1, the fortification of boundaries on Day 2, the radical cleansing of Day 3, the intentional sowing of new seeds on Day 4, the steadfast perseverance through the tempest of Day 5, and the integration into a new identity on Day 6. Each day had built upon the last, strengthening her resolve, deepening her understanding, transforming her from the inside out. The method It taught her that true freedom from external bondage begins with internal sovereignty. It showed her that the battle for her habits was truly a battle for her heart, for the very essence of who she was and who she was becoming. As the sun reached its zenith on Day 7, Alara felt a deep gratitude for the ancient wisdom, for the silent sentinels who had guided her, for the strength she had found within herself. She understood now that this vigilance, this guarding of her heart, was not a temporary project, but a lifelong practice, a continuous act of love for herself and for the life she was destined to live. The chains were broken, the shadow was banished. And Alara, the keeper of her heart, stood at the dawn of an unbroken, unfettered future. This story, Alara's story, is not just about her. It's about the unseen battles waged within each of us, the subtle whispers of the shadows that seek to derail our deepest intentions. It's about the universal human struggle against complacency, against the insidious pull of habits that diminish our potential. And it's about a timeless, powerful truth, a single method from an ancient book, waiting to be rediscovered and applied in our modern lives. The Book of Proverbs, with its profound wisdom, offers us not just advice, but a blueprint for guarding the very core of our being, our heart. For everything we do, every action, every word, every dream flows from this wellspring. To neglect it is to surrender our destiny to the whims of circumstance and the tyranny of unconscious habits. To guard it above all else is to reclaim our power to be. So I invite you, just as Alara did, to embark on your own 7-day journey. Choose one habit that holds you captive, one shadow that dims your light. And for the next 7 days, practice this one method: guard your heart. Observe its triggers, fortify its defenses, cleanse its impurities, sow new seeds of purpose, stand steadfast in the face of temptation, and embrace the dawn of your new self. The journey may be challenging, the shadow may resist, but remember Alara's resolve, and remember the promise of ancient wisdom. Your heart is your most sacred ground. Guard it, and everything truly life-giving will flow from it. This is not merely about breaking a habit. It is about forging a more intentional, more powerful, more authentic you. It is about claiming the peace and purpose that are rightfully yours. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.